It all started with a box. Not the kind you'd expect to change anything, just a steel container weathered by half a century of salt air and Pacific rain. But when 11-year-old Thomas Warner tripped over it on the muddy shoreline west of Bremerton, no one on base could have imagined what would follow. It was late August 2025, the kind of dry stretch Washington rarely saw. For weeks the tide had retreated in strange ways, leaving cracked patches of shoreline visible for the first time in years. Fishermen joked about the smell of the exposed mud. But on that morning the smell was different, metallic, almost acrid. Thomas would remember that smell for the rest of his life. He'd been dragging pieces of driftwood back to his bike when his foot hit the corner of something solid. He scraped away the muck and saw dull grey beneath. At first he thought it might be an old ammo box. Bremerton was filled with remnants of military history. Shells, rusted helmets, parts of decommissioned ships. But as he pried it free, the lid gave way, revealing something far worse. Inside were bones, a partial skeleton, wrapped in what once might have been a Navy duffel. And next to it something stranger, an ID tag cracked and faded, stamped with the date Feb 1968. The sheriff's office arrived within an hour. Then the Navy. By noon, news vans lined the ferry dock, their antennas turning toward the fog that still clung to the hills of Kitsap County. Locals leaned over police tape, whispering names of men who never came home, names that had echoed through the Navy Yard bars for decades. But no one dared to say them aloud. Detective Mira Lang, who had grown up in Bremerton, was among the first to step onto the scene. She'd handled her share of cold cases, but this one felt heavier. Something about the proximity to the base, the ID tag, and the way the remains were packed. Deliberate, careful. She could feel the weight of history pressing through every grain of that wet earth. "Lock it down," she told the deputies. "No one in or out without clearance." By late afternoon, bulldozers and cranes were rumbling along the shore, excavating the area. They found traces of cloth, a rusted knife, and 2 more metal fragments, dog tags belonging to men stationed at Naval Base Kitsap in 1968. But their records told a stranger story. None of those sailors were ever reported missing. Not officially. Lang requested access to the Navy archives. It took 48 hours for the first files to arrive, incomplete, faded, and hastily redacted. The kind of paperwork meant to make people stop asking questions. She didn't. The more she read, the more a pattern began to form. February 1968. 2 sailors transferred out of Bremerton under disciplinary review. A third reassigned to Vietnam weeks later, then reported killed in action. Yet in all 3 cases, the signatures confirming those transfers were identical and forged. Lang's instincts told her this wasn't just a local cover-up. It was institutional. She met with Commander James Rutledge, retired, one of the oldest surviving officers from the base. He lived in Ballard now, in a quiet home filled with model ships and folded flags. When she showed him the photo of the dog tags, he froze. His hands trembled as he removed his glasses. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I think you've just opened something that was meant to stay buried." Lang pressed. "You knew them?" He nodded. 3 good men, except one of them wasn't who he said he was. That sentence would replay in her head for weeks. The story spread quickly, the Bremerton Box case, as the media named it. Reporters speculated about espionage, Vietnam-era experiments, lost patrols. But for the residents of Kitsap County, especially those with fathers or grandfathers who served there, it wasn't just another mystery. It was personal. They'd lived with rumors for years, whispers of sailors who vanished after a brawl or who crossed paths with the wrong officer. The box felt like proof that something deeply wrong had happened on their soil. Across the bay, the Navy scrambled to control the narrative. An internal statement classified the discovery as historical material under review. But investigators privately told Lang to stop digging. There were national security implications. She ignored them. Night after night, she pored over files from the 1960s, trying to piece together what tied the names on those tags together. It wasn't until she looked at the roster from February 14, 1968, that she found it. All 3 men had served on the same classified repairs, crew aboard the USS Callaway, a destroyer that docked in Bremerton after sustaining storm damage in the North Pacific. Lang traced a single line through a faded log entry. Routine maintenance interrupted. Conflict in crew quarters. No follow-up, no report. Just those 6 words. 57 years later, standing among fog and flashing lights by the Puget Sound, she realized the story wasn't about who was found. It was about who had hidden them, and why. And the next morning, when she received a call from a retired Navy accountant who claimed to have kept copies of original pay records from that week, including names the Navy had erased from their registry, and she knew the box on the shore was just the beginning. The echoes of 1968 were resurfacing, and this time they wouldn't be silenced. The drizzle hadn't stopped since dawn. Detective Mira Lang drove along the coast road, the grey sky pressed so low it seemed to touch the water. She hadn't slept. On the seat beside her was a folder, payroll sheets yellowed and brittle, stamped February 1968. 3 sailors' names appeared: Bennett, Rhodes, and Callahan. Each one marked as transferred. Yet their paychecks kept coming for weeks afterward, signed by the same unreadable hand. She wouldn't have had them at all if not for Arthur Kellen. The retired Navy accountant had found her number through an old colleague. His apartment sat above a pawn shop in Bremerton, always smelling of smoke and damp carpet. "I was told to shred these," he'd said, pushing the envelope across the table. "But I couldn't. Every line told me something was wrong." Lang asked, "Who signed the orders?" Kellen gave a hollow laugh. "Nobody." The stamp came in red ink sealed under codes. NSRU 4. It wasn't a place I could find on any chart. The name existed only on paper. Now she sat across from Elena Vasquez inside Pier 91's archive facility, the hum of microfilm machines filling the air. Vasquez, a naval historian, adjusted her glasses and tapped one page gently. "NSRU 4, she whispered. "Naval Security Research Unit 4. Officially for psychological research. Off-record containment. Projects buried before they started." "Where?" Lang asked. "Hood Canal, near Bangor. A small base closed in 1970. They left it to rot." By early afternoon, Lang's windshield wipers carved a steady rhythm through mist as she crossed to the peninsula. The trees grew denser, the air wet and silent. She parked near a rusted fence, slipped through an opening, and followed a moss-covered trail toward the sound of dripping water. Then she saw it. A bunker collapsed into the hillside, half consumed by ferns. A weathered sign leaned nearby, NSRU 4, restricted. She stepped inside, her flashlight beam catching broken monitors and dust-thick panels. The air smelled like rust and seawater. "Detective Mira Lang," she recorded quietly. "Hood Canal Site Survey, potential link to 1968 disappearances." The echo faded. Then footsteps behind her. "You shouldn't be here," a man said. Lang turned sharply. A tall figure stood in the doorway, white hair slicked back, wearing civilian clothes that didn't hide the military stance. "Lieutenant Harris," he said, voice low. "I helped close this place." Lang steadied her light. "Then tell me what it was." He looked around as if the walls might still be listening. "Officially, communications testing. Truthfully, a dumping ground for things the Navy didn't want on record. They built it to forget." He reached into his jacket and unfolded a faded photo, 4 sailors grinning on a pier, Dock 3 painted on wood behind them. Lang recognized 3 faces from Kellen's list. The 4th man, taller, composed, was new. "That's Chief Petty Officer Raymond Kipp," Harris said quietly. "He was our quartermaster, drowned that same week. But here's the thing. I recovered his body 3 days before they said he died." Lang frowned. "So they changed reports?" "They had to," Harris said. "Those 4 handled cargo from the USS Callaway. Something marked as external research materials." Kipp asked too many questions. Days later they were gone. "And who gave the commands?" Lang asked. Harris's jaw tightened. "A man called Walker. He arrived that week, claimed to be with Naval Intelligence. No badge, no record, no chain of command. He organized the transfer, then vanished. No one's seen him since." Lang studied the 4th man in the photo. "That's him." "No. Walker never let anyone photograph him. The moment that picture was taken, I knew he'd seen too much." Outside, rain began falling harder, beads cutting through gaps in the roof. Lang switched off her light. "You helped hide it." "I did what I was told," Harris said. "Refusal meant prison." "Or worse." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "I watched them load the crate, small metal locked tight. When it came off the destroyer, I swear I heard something shift inside. Then Walker ordered us out. Lang shivered. The same kind of box buried at the shore? Maybe the same one, Harris said. They told us to forget. I thought I did until now. He looked at her sadly. If you find that man, Walker, don't ask him why. Ask him who he was protecting. By nightfall, Lang sat in her motel room near the bay, lamplight flickering over scattered papers. The rain pressed softly against the glass. In front of her lay the photo, 4 smiles from 57 years ago. 3 ghosts identified, one phantom orchestrating their silence. She traced her finger across the words scribbled on the back. Feb 1468, one last night at Dock 3. Lang leaned back, the hum of the old radiator filling the silence. Whatever happened that night, she whispered, didn't end there. Through the window, fog drifted off the water, heavy and unbroken. Somewhere beyond it, a man named Walker had walked away and took the truth of 1968 with him. The storm hit during the night. Sheets of rain pounded the motel windows as wind howled off the sound, shaking the thin walls. Detective Mira Lang barely slept. The photo of the 4 sailors lay on the desk beside the ashtray, edges curling near the flame of a dying lamp. By dawn, she packed up and drove toward the Navy yards. The streets were soaked, scattered with leaves and gravel. Dock 3 had been sealed for decades, its entryway barricaded with steel wire and a rusted Navy emblem still bolted above the gate. But by sunrise that morning, Lang had a warrant in her pocket, signed reluctantly by a federal judge. When she arrived, the guard on duty looked half awake. "Detective Lang," she said, flashing her credentials. "Cold Case Division? I'll need access to Dock 3. The man squinted through rain. "You've got some nerve showing that paperwork around here. They told us to act like Dock 3 doesn't exist. Then consider this morning an exception," he sighed, unlocked the gate and turned away like a man who didn't want to witness what came next. Inside, the dock stretched silent and grey. Lang's boots echoed against the wet concrete. Cranes leaned like skeletons over the pier. She followed faded warning signs until she reached a warehouse marked Storage or Cargo 68. Most of it was empty, dust, old pallets, a broken lamp fixture dangling from a cord. Then her light caught on something beneath a tarp at the far wall. When she pulled it away, her heart stopped. A container, military green, rectangular, steel, identical to the box the boy had found months earlier. Its lock was corroded with salt. She crouched, brushing away grime until the faded stamp became visible. "Property of NSRU-4. Lang called it in, her voice steady but fast. Within the hour, 2 technicians from the forensics team arrived. They photographed everything, then began cutting the lock under her supervision. The sound echoed through the warehouse, sharp and hollow. When the lid finally creaked open, the air turned sour. Inside lay scraps of uniform, brittle documents, and a cracked cassette recorder sealed in plastic. Lang held it carefully, the label barely legible. Dock 3, Feb 14, 1968. For 100 hours. The technicians exchanged uneasy glances. Lang slipped the cassette into a secure bag. "I'll take it from here." Back in her car, she sat motionless, raindrops racing down the windshield. Then she drove straight to the lab downtown. Hours later, the recording played through static. The first voice was faint, but recognizably young, full of forced confidence. "Bennett logging cargo transfer. Surface crew present. Rhodes, Callahan, Kip, time 0100. One unidentified officer on deck. Crate weight approximately..." Then the tape crackled and a new voice replaced his. "Stop recording." Lang froze as she heard the tone. Firm, calm, commanding. Harris had described it perfectly. Walker. Another pause, footsteps, metal doors slamming. Then a muffled shout. "You can't just..." The sentence ended in a crash. More static followed, then silence. Lang replayed it 3 times. The timestamp matched Harris's story exactly. The men hadn't left that pier alive. She sent copies for audio restoration and stepped outside for air. Wind cut across the alley, sharp with sea salt. In her mind, the scene played again. 4 sailors, a mysterious officer, a sealed crate, and something inside nobody wanted named. 2 hours later, a call came from an unlisted number. The voice on the other end was familiar. "You've been busy, Detective." Lang froze. "Harris?" "You shouldn't have gone to the dock," he said quietly. "They'll know now. Who's they?" But the line went dead. That evening she traced Harris's address through the records division and drove to his home near Silverdale. The porch light was on, rain dripping from the gutters. She knocked once. No answer, twice, still nothing. The door creaked open, unlocked. Inside, the house was dark except for a lamp in the living room. Papers were scattered across the floor. Harris sat in an armchair, eyes wide open, a revolver limp in his hand. The carpet beneath him was soaked red. Lang called it in, her voice hollow. Paramedics confirmed what she already knew. No sign of struggle. A single gunshot. But something felt staged, too neat, too quick. On the table beside him lay an envelope marked with her name. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single photograph. The same pier, the same four men, but this time Walker stood with them. His face finally visible. Clean-cut, mid-30s, cold eyes. On the back, a note written in Harris's shaky hand. "He's still alive. Name isn't Walker. Look at the transfers from April 70, you'll find him." That night, Lang drove west until the lights of Seattle faded beyond the mist. She parked by the shoreline, the same waters that had hidden the truth for half a century. The tape, the bodies, the falsified reports, everything pointed to one man who had changed names and vanished through paperwork. Lang stared at the photo under the dashboard light. "If you're still out there," she whispered, "I'm coming." The wind outside howled again, swelling against the waves. Somewhere beyond the sound, the man once called Walker was watching the same storm roll in, and for the first time since 1968, his secret was coming home. Morning light crept through clouds, pale and colorless above the sound. Detective Mira Lang stared at the photograph on her desk. The man Harris had called Walker looked older now that she saw him in printed form, his eyes sharp, expression too calm for the chaos surrounding his name. On the back of the image, Harris's final note bled through faintly. "Look at the transfers from April 70. The precinct was half empty." Rain pattered against the windows. As Lang scrolled through declassified payroll logs, fingers moving fast, eyes burning from sleeplessness. Those pages were shredded by black tape. Entire sentences vanished to censorship. Still, patterns survived, sequences of payroll IDs jumping out like breadcrumbs. Then she saw it. Commander Arthur Winslow, reassigned Naval Intelligence, April 2, 1970. It matched the date Harris mentioned. Lang ran the serial through the internal system, but the screen flashed red. "File restricted, level 4. She leaned back, rubbing her temple. The bureaucracy spoke in silence louder than any confession. Lang drove across town to meet Elena Vasquez at the archive annex. The historian was already pouring coffee, hair messy but eyes alert. "Winslow?" Vasquez repeated when Lang mentioned the name. "The Navy declared him dead in a helicopter crash over Panama. But nobody ever confirmed remains. Could he be Walker?" Lang asked. Vasquez looked unconvinced. "If Winslow was undercover, his personnel file would have been rewritten. Alias creation wasn't unusual, but field officers rarely used the same location twice." "Why Bremerton? That's what I'm finding out," Lang said. Hours later, Lang drove through mist toward the Pier District. Her contact from Navy Public Affairs, Commander Nathan Cole, agreed to a brief meeting. In a dim office overlooking the harbor, Cole examined the photograph and frowned. "You didn't get this from me," he said quietly, pulling a yellow folder from his drawer. "Arthur Winslow, Psychological Operations assigned to Project Olympia, late 67. Reassigned to stateside supervision, then disappeared. That's all I know." "What was Project Olympia?" Lang pressed. Cole shook his head. "Don't ask questions that bury careers." Lang took the folder and left. On her laptop, the name appeared again once inside an old budget report. Project Olympia, Communications Field Testing, NSRU 4. The same code from the sailors' files. The same dead end. By afternoon, Lang called her old source Kellen. The accountant's voice rasped with age. "Project Olympia," he repeated. That label came up after the Bremerton incident. It wasn't research, it was cleanup. They used new names for everything that needed to disappear. Winslow handled the accounts. What happened to him? A long pause. "Some say he retired. Others say he started living under the system he created." That night, The rain turned to mist as Lang drove through forest roads north of Port Townsend. The address from an old property record belonging to Winslow led her to a cabin secluded above the water. The porch sagged. A single light flickered inside. She knocked once. No response, twice, still silence. She pushed the door. It creaked open easily. Inside, dust floated in cold air. Furniture covered with sheets, walls lined with old maps and fading photographs. But on a small desk sat a box, navy blue metal like the ones from Dock 3. Lang's pulse quickened as she opened it. Inside were documents sealed in plastic. ID cards, Navy insignia, and letters signed Commander A. Winslow. In one memo, a repeated phrase appeared: "Containment authorized. Priority Alpha." Another photograph fell from the stack. 4 sailors in a cabin, same faces, but a figure blurred behind them. Uniformed, high rank. Winslow. The floor above her creaked. Lang froze, listening. "Seattle PD," she called, gun steady. "Show yourself." No answer. Only the faint hum of something mechanical. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning under her weight. At the top landing, a tape recorder spun on a small table, its red light blinking. She stopped as a man's voice broke through the static. "Mira Lang," it said, calm and distant. Her hand lifted slightly, heart pounding. "I expected you sooner," the voice continued. "You're walking in circles around the past. You think you're chasing the truth, but truth's already inside you." Static crackled, then his tone hardened. "Leave the house, walk away." Project Olympia never ended. The player clicked off, silence swallowing the room. Lang approached slowly, pressing her palm against the cold metal casing. A single sheet of paper lay beside it, coordinates scribbled in blue ink, leading to a coastal grid near Bangor, the same stretch where Dock 3 once operated. She looked through the window. Below, near the shoreline, a lone figure stood in the fog, motionless. Turned toward the cabin. Lang raised her weapon, but when she looked again, the figure was gone. The recorder clicked on by itself. The voice softer this time. "See you soon?" "Detective." Lang backed away, pulse steady, eyes locked on the spinning reel. In the quiet, her reflection in the glass looked almost like his. Both of them haunted by the same unfinished story, waiting at the edge of the water. The coordinates haunted Detective Mira Lang all night. She stayed parked near the cabin until mist swallowed the shoreline below. The tape recorder sat on the seat beside her, still and waiting. Its final words burned through her mind. Project Olympia never ended. By dawn she was driving again. The road curled through forest and hills toward the abandoned naval grounds north of Bangor. The area was marked as restricted, fenced off since the 70s. She parked behind a row of decayed trucks and stepped out into damp air that smelled of salt and rust. The map on her phone ended at a narrow dirt path. She followed it under dripping pines until the trees gave way to concrete and wild grass. Ahead stood 2 hangars, roofs caved in, windows obscured by moss. A faded sign still clung to one wall. Olympia Facility 1A Lang approached the larger hangar. Its steel door looked fused shut, but a keypad rested beside it, half buried in grime. She wiped dust away and tried a code, the same numbers written on the coordinates. 214. The panel beeped once, and then the latch clicked open. Inside, the darkness felt cold and wet, like stepping underwater. Her flashlight beam slid across rusted desks, broken monitors and file cabinets overturned decades earlier. The walls dripped with condensation. At the far end, a faint blue light flickered. A single monitor glowed, still alive after half a century, powered by a forgotten generator. The screen displayed one word: archive. Lang hesitated, then typed Walker on the keyboard. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then folders flickered on the screen, each marked containment footage. She opened the first file. Static filled the monitor before shapes appeared. 4 sailors on a dock, lifting a crate dripping with seawater. A 5th man stood behind them, face hidden by shadow. The frame jumped, then ended. The next file showed the same pier, but empty. Water rolled against the wood. Something dark spread beneath the surface, a stain widening. She watched, breath still, until the screen froze and the sound cut abruptly. Lang opened a final clip labeled Dock 3, 0140. The image wavered. The box from the pier sat open on concrete, something indistinct lying inside. A calm voice said, "Containment successful. Terminate witnesses." Her stomach turned. She recognized the speaker. The tone, the control. It was Winslow, Walker, whatever his name once was. He'd recorded the order himself. The video ended in light and noise, the image burning to white as if overexposed. Lang shut the monitor and staggered backward. The air inside the hangar seemed heavier now, humming with unseen movement. She aimed her flashlight toward the corridor. Something shifted between the pillars, a silhouette moving silently through dust. "Seattle PD," she shouted. Her voice echoed, unanswered. She followed the movement, gun raised, down the narrow passage leading outside. Rain drifted through the cracked doorway, carrying fog from the sound. Then she saw him. A lone figure stood at the edge of the pier, coat flaring gently in the wind. Lang's breath caught. His posture was the same calm certainty she'd studied in the photos. "Arthur Winslow," she called. He turned slowly. His face was older, thinner, but unmistakable, controlled, detached, resolute. "You should have left this alone," he said. His voice blended with the wind, neither loud nor soft, just there. "You murdered them," Lang replied. "They were sailors, not subjects. It wasn't murder. It was containment," Winslow said. "They opened what was meant to stay sealed. I did what I was ordered to do. You ordered their deaths." His expression didn't change. "Containment demanded sacrifice. You think it ended at the sound? Every decade someone digs, someone drowns. Because truth is heavier than water." Lang took a step closer. "You don't get to rewrite it." "I already did," Winslow said. "Every record you touched, every file you opened, I left those for you. The story you're rebuilding was designed to lead here." She realized he was standing near a second crate, smaller, same navy paint streaked with rust. "What's in there?" "A remembrance," Winslow said. "A gift from the first containment. History doesn't fade. Here it circulates." Sirens echoed faintly through the mist. Distant patrols closing in. Winslow smiled faintly. "You'll find nothing but echoes." He stepped backward toward the waterline. "The program never stopped, Detective." "The name's changed, that's all." Lang raised her weapon. "Don't do it. You still think you're outside the experiment," he murmured. Then he turned, walked 3 steps, and disappeared into fog so thick it swallowed sound. There was no splash, no trace. Only grey waves breaking against the pier. Lang stood rooted, the world silent except for the hum of the dying generator inside the hangar. The crate beside her dripped slowly, salt water pooling at her boots. She opened it with trembling hands. Empty except for one object, a recorder, identical to the one in her car. The red light blinked. When she pressed play, Winslow's voice whispered again. "This is the part where you decide whether the next body found will be yours." The tape clicked off. The fog rolled closer. Bremerton's shoreline was quiet again, though nothing about it felt calm. Detective Mira Lang stood beside the taped perimeter, where divers had searched all morning. The fog still hovered over the water, indifferent. They found no body, no coat, no trace of Arthur Winslow. The ocean had swallowed him completely. Lang's mind replayed the moment he vanished. Even now she couldn't decide if he'd jumped or simply stepped into the grey and dissolved. A man who had erased others for decades surely knew how to erase himself. Back inside her office, the crate sat sealed in evidence. The second recorder was identical to the first. Same make, same scratches along the corner. Staff technicians transferred the tape to digital format. The message was brief, distorted by static and salt. "You've reached the end of what you can prove. But the program lives because no one believes in it. You've already done what was needed. Revived it." The words bled into her thoughts long after the sound faded. Lang poured herself coffee gone cold hours ago and stared at the maps pinned across her wall. They told a slow story. 1968, 1970, 2025. 3 years tied by one repeating footprint, always near these waters. She traced each marker with the edge of her pen until a knock came at the door. Sergeant Miller stepped inside, holding a folder. "Lab processed the prints from Dock 3. Got a match from Naval Archives." Lang straightened. "Winslow?" He hesitated. "Partially. The clean set matches his 1970 records. The other came from material logged this year. Someone rekeyed those docs in March. Digital logs show one access card active under an alias, Ryan Holt." Lang froze. "You're telling me someone else has been down there?" "Last month," Miller said. "If Winslow really died, someone was keeping his work from ending." That evening, Lang drove back toward Hood Canal to the last location, tagged in the coordinates. The rain had stopped, but silence sat heavy on the air. The hangars she'd entered before were now sealed by federal tape. Yet beyond them, beyond the trees, lay another structure she hadn't seen. A small communications bunker half hidden beneath brush. She pushed through the overgrowth and found the entrance unlocked. Inside, old equipment hummed faintly, powered by a new generator. Papers littered the floor. Lang lifted one up. It wasn't from the 60s. It was printed last year, updated letterhead, same insignia. Project Olympia, she read aloud, voice trembling. Subject replication successful. Containment division reassigned. Location Navy Research Site 12 Everett. Her stomach tightened. Winslow hadn't been bluffing. The operation still existed under new names, alive in secret rooms less than 50 miles away. A loose drawer caught her attention. Inside was a small hard drive covered in dust. She plugged it into her field laptop, watching the files appear. Modern video, surveillance timestamps dated January 2025. The first showed an empty lab, sterile and bright. The second showed technicians standing around a metal structure, almost identical to the crate from Dock 3. The subtitle read, Containment Reconstruction, Phase 2. Lang played the audio track. A man's voice guided the crew. Calm, precise, unmistakable Winslow. Her heart dropped. The same tone, the same measured cadence. Proceed with transfer, he said on screen, alive, instructing. Lang froze the frame. The man's face looked older, yes, but too identical to be coincidence. Either the body she thought vanished into the sound wasn't real, or he'd never been there to begin with. Behind her, a door creaked. She spun, gun lifted. A flashlight beam filled the hall, landing on her chest. Seattle PD, drop it! Someone shouted. She lowered her weapon slowly as Miller stepped through the doorway, flanked by federal agents. Lang, he said tightly. They told me you'd come back. Who's they? She demanded. The Navy, one agent said. You're trespassing on secured property. Hand over your files. You knew, Lang said, her voice shaking. You knew this operation never shut down. The agent's jaw tightened. Containment protects this country, detective. That's all you need to know. They stepped forward to seize her laptop. But she ejected the drive and slipped it into her pocket before handing it over. Hours later, Lang sat in her car overlooking the water again. The fog had returned, soft and endless. Her badge lay on the dashboard. She replayed Winslow's recorded voice through the small speaker once more. You think you're ending something, he said. But you're just the next custodian. She exhaled slowly, looking out at the black expanse of sea. Ever since that first box surfaced, everything had circled back here. To the water, to the silence it promised and never delivered. Lang started the engine, headlights cutting through mist. She turned north toward Everett. If Project Olympia had a new home, she would reach it first. Somewhere on the waves behind her, unseen through fog, a red beacon blinked slowly. For an instant, she thought she heard a voice, low, mechanical, almost human, whisper through the static of her radio. Welcome back to containment. Detective Mira Lang drove north through a grey haze that blurred sea and sky into one endless sheet of colour. Hours passed, every thought looping back to the last word Winslow ever said. Containment. She hadn't told anyone her destination. Trust had become another case gone cold. By mid-afternoon, she reached Everett's industrial edge. Navy Research Site 12 sat behind barbed wire and motion sensors. The facility wasn't marked on maps, but its fences gleamed like they had been installed yesterday. Lang parked behind stacked shipping containers and waited, counting guard rotations. When the next patrol turned the corner, she slipped through a bent section of fence. Inside, the air smelled of rain and metal. Corridors ran beneath bright floodlights humming above steel floors. The place wasn't abandoned. It was alive. She found a stairwell leading down. The hum grew stronger until the sound felt like a heartbeat under the concrete. Signs painted on the wall read, Olympia Division Restricted Access. Her pulse quickened. The final door locked with a keypad. Lang typed the same code she'd found in the coordinates, 0214. A green light blinked. The panel hissed open. The chamber inside glowed white and cold. Dozens of technicians moved between computers, surrounding a glass cylinder filled with milky fluid. In its center floated a figure, half human, half anatomy lesson, pale limbs suspended under light. Lang whispered, "Oh my God!" A calm voice echoed from above. Punctual as always, she spun around. Arthur Winslow descended a set of stairs, posture precise, expression untouched by time. His uniform bore a new insignia, a circle crossed by one line. "Thought you preferred haunting docks," he said. Lang drew her weapon. "You shouldn't exist," he smiled faintly. "That depends on how you define existing." "Step away from it," she ordered, nodding toward the cylinder. Winslow stopped halfway. "You think I built this to hide? But Project Olympia was never about secrecy. It was repetition, ensuring what began in 1968 survived everything, even death. You killed those men to protect lies." "I preserved order," he said. "Containment demanded it. The world only functions when some truths are buried." Lang's hand tightened on the gun. "And this?" "What is it?" Winslow looked toward the floating shape. "Evolution. Memory engineered. Every failure before brought us closer to this. From the control station, a technician called, 'Sir, containment pressure is unstable.'" Winslow didn't move. "Begin phase release." Lang stepped forward. "Don't," he looked at her. "If you think justice is your anchor, ask yourself why you followed the trail. Part of you needed to see this." She aimed directly between his shoulders. "You open that and no one walks out." "Then we'll agree on that," he said quietly, and pressed a single button. Sirens erupted. The cylinder hissed as steel cracked under pressure. The fluid spilled out, steam rising in clouds. The shape inside flexed, skin breaking apart in white fragments that dissolved before touching the ground. Technicians scattered. Lang ran for cover, shouting for emergency overrides. Sparks rained from the ceiling. When the alarm finally cut, the chamber filled with fog. Winslow remained standing near the broken tank, soaked but calm. "You think you stopped something," he said. "You only set it free." Lang circled toward the exit, smoke burning her throat. "What's been freed?" "Memory," Winslow said. "Every record, every truth you hunted. It's already rewriting itself. As where?" she demanded. He looked around the collapsing room. Everywhere. The floor shook, lights flickering. Lang turned to flee, but he shouted behind her, "You can't contain inheritance." And then the sound became thunder. The chamber burst into flame. Lang stumbled through debris, reaching the stairwell as the ceiling gave way. She climbed until daylight cut through smoke. Outside, federal vehicles screeched to a halt, soldiers in plain uniforms pouring through the gates. One called over a loudspeaker, "Detective Lang, step away from the structure." She dropped her weapon, coughing, and raised her hands. The air smelled like burning plastic and salt water. Men in breathing masks moved past her, carrying sealed containers toward the destroyed wing. Each case bore the same logo, a circle with a single line, the symbol of Olympia. A man in a black coat approached. "Detective Lang," he said calmly. "You were never here." She met his eyes. "You'll bury this too?" He glanced at the burning facility. "Burying is all we do." As they surrounded the wreckage, Lang stepped back toward the fence. Smoke thickened until the scene blurred to grey. In the distance, through the roar of engines, she heard Winslow's voice. Only one word, looping through static like a broken transmission. "Inheritance." Lang watched the sky darken above the ruins. Somewhere beneath it, the truth was alive again, just like he said. She turned toward the road as the first sirens faded, realizing containment was never a place. It was every secret left behind, long enough to be found. Rain returned before dawn, washing soot from the highway and spreading the smell of smoke across the coast. Detective Mira Lang drove in silence, her windshield streaked with ash carried from the ruins of Everett. Each mile pulled her farther from the base, but the memory clung like the smell of oil on skin. She'd seen Winslow vanish twice now, once in the sound and once in flame. Yet his voice followed, always the same word whispering through static. Inheritance. By morning, she reached Seattle. The precinct looked smaller, emptier. Inside her office, lights flickered across scattered papers. The caseboard still hung heavy with photos. Dock 3, the sailors, the box, the coordinates. Lang studied it all again, every arrow and timeline ending near the same name. She wrote one last note at the center. Project Olympia continues. Her computer chimed. An email had arrived without sender or subject line. Attached was a single video file labeled Final Containment. She hesitated, then pressed play. The image showed a lab, not the Everett facility, but something newer, brighter. In the frame, two technicians prepared a sealed crate identical to the others. Behind them, a clear reflection appeared in the glass wall. Winslow. Alive. Older, thinner, wearing a suit instead of a uniform. "I told you, history doesn't end, Detective," his voice said. "It migrates." Lang froze. "How?" she whispered. Winslow leaned toward the camera. "You saw a body. You saw smoke. You saw what we wanted you to see. Containment is adaptation. Remove one vessel, another appears." His tone remained calm, almost kind. "If you're recording this, and you will, then understand. Olympia was never about weapons, it was about memory, about ensuring knowledge persists when truth becomes inconvenient." The video ended abruptly. Lang archived the file under a hidden directory and killed the monitor. The digital clock on the wall blinked 9:30 a.m., though time had stopped meaning much. She knew she was being watched now, not by press or politicians, but by the same silence that had followed her since that first box surfaced. She gathered the evidence into a sealed envelope, walked it to the pier and handed it to a reporter she trusted. "If something happens to me," she said, "you'll know where to start." The wind off the bay cut bitter and cold. For hours, she sat in her car, replaying fragments of every place this case had taken her. Kellen's cluttered apartment, Vasquez whispering in archives, Harris trembling with guilt, Doc 3's tide cracking metal, and Winslow's unblinking stare as the world collapsed around his idea. Each name felt part of one long equation written in water. That afternoon, her phone rang from a blocked number. A low voice spoke. "You did your part," it said. "Who is this?" "The rest is procedure." The line went dead. Lang drove again, through streets glazed with rain, heading nowhere specific. Every radio station buzzed with interference, faint fragments of reports on the Everett fire. Officials claiming an electrical fault, nothing more. The word Olympia never appeared. At a red light near the ferry terminal, the interference on her radio shifted. Static cleared just long enough for a phrase to slip through. "Welcome back, Detective Lang." Her hand tightened on the steering wheel. She turned off the radio, stared out at the blurred skyline, and exhaled slowly. That evening, she returned to Dock 3, now silent under thick fog. The ground still bore faint scars where rescue crews had dug months earlier. She walked to the edge of the pier, rain pattering on the water, and set the original recorder on the planks. "Arthur Winslow," she said softly. "You wanted memory to survive. Find it will," she pressed record. Her voice filled the damp air, steady and low. In 1968, 4 men disappeared under orders no one signed. Their bodies were silenced, but the file lived. 57 years later, another voice carried their secret forward. That voice dies here with mine. She clicked stop, sealed the recorder inside a plastic envelope and dropped it into the water. The splash was small, lost to the waves. Fog rolled in thicker, covering the bay. For a moment she stood still, realizing that perhaps Winslow had been right all along. Containment wasn't destruction, it was transformation. She hadn't ended the project, she had become part of its archive. Her phone buzzed once. No caller, no message, only coordinates. The same sequence, rewritten with one difference, a new date. February 14, 2125. Lang smiled faintly, slipping the phone into her pocket. The rain hid her face as the tide rose to meet the shore. Beneath the water, the first recorder blinked once, a red light searching the dark. Containment continued. For years, these cases were forgotten. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Here we reopen the files, reveal the evidence, and give a voice to those who were silenced. Subscribe now and step inside the archive where time, lies, and justice finally meet. Because every secret eventually speaks.